wait a couple minutes because we're missing Kathy and Jennifer from Ancaster, but,
They're coming from, Kathy comes from Caledonia.
oh, right, so, yeah. It's snowing a little bit. So, we have Leo Santos with us from, good morning.
Good morning.
It's a street chair.
Yes.
Street chair. Nice to meet you. Welcome.
Great to see you.
Yeah, this is beginning of us all taking turns as chair, so I get to be chair today. And let's see, we'll start with the update. Want to start with Susie?
Sure. Happy New Year, everybody. We all survived the holidays, which is good. Not too much to update in International Village. We have a new design company moving into the area called The Laundry, which we're really excited about. And they specialize in apparel. So they've actually leased one of our brand new spaces that's been renovated and redone into a beautiful working space. So we were excited, and that pretty much puts us at almost full vacancy in our BIA. So we're very excited. We've got a few spots left to fill, but other than that, it's coming on nice. And that's about all I have for today.
Rachel, do you want us to come back to you?
I can go if you want.
Go ahead.
Hi, Erin. Sorry, I'm late. RBA is really good. I am amazed actually. I'm really excited with RBA and where it's going because I think there's a buzz about it and I think people are catching on. Sorry, I'm out of breath, really healthy.
Did you just have
So it's doing really good. I continually get emails from people saying, you know, I'm looking to purchase a property on Barton Street. Where would you recommend? Where's this? And you know, I was speaking with one investor yesterday who's purchased a property that's been vacant for a while on Emerald and Barton, and he's completely renovated it. So it was a really dilapidated building, and he's turned it 360. So I'm really excited because there's numerous cases of that where investors have come and have really improved the buildings and as such the area. So yeah, I'm excited where we're going.
Oh, sure. Good morning. How are you? It's been quiet in Waterdown since all of our six events of Christmas or whatever it was. Planning the farmers market for the new year and spring plantings and all of the things. We're getting right into it all in one day, so I'm looking forward to it.
Concession Street certainly went through an exciting time in December in terms of winter solstice on Concession Street. Unfortunately, without snow, horses do not sound good. They did take a lot of people around Concession Street, carolers and so on, but it was missing some of the key elements, but it was certainly a generator of interest in a lot of people in various ways. We had a breakfast with Santa on the 19th. That went well. And beyond that, obviously, we're preparing for spring developments. Beautification is a big piece of our agenda.
Ottawa Street is relatively quiet. Just interesting that Rachel was saying we've got a few vacancies now, which is actually kind of exciting as opposed to depressing to look at what new can come into the street, and we've had some interest already. Starting to go through the madness that is planning for So Hungry. I'm going to have just getting started on this, further discussions with Bridget regarding the whole seat process. A lot of people I found don't get the concept of one stop, and so there's still some bugs that need to be worked out in the system, but it's interesting.
Does that leave me? So Dundas, yeah, it's quiet in Dundas too. We had a really busy Christmas, December. We have one store closing this month, the end of this month, Julie Fashion Essentials. They'll be missed. Dorothy, the owner, is a board member and pretty active, so she'll be gone. We'll have to replace her. And same as everyone else, we're just gearing up for 2016 with all our advertising and events. And that's it. Wow, it's weird being last. All right, so do you have any changes to the agenda?
We do not, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we need a motion to accept the agenda. saw all kinds of hands there. I saw Rachel and Susie.
Maybe just as a note, I know it's a challenge for me sometimes, just tilt your name tags this way. Just when things are flying, it makes it a little bit easier to chair.
Thanks, guys.
I
Oh, declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? Oh, we were discussing declarations of interest at our agenda meeting, and Doug isn't here, but he has been declaring interest at the beginning of every meeting because of his situation with his wife having a store on Concession Street. So, I'm gonna ask Councillor Green to re-explain
Yeah.
how he explained to me the best process for declaring a conflict.
So certainly as an advocacy group, as an advisory group, you guys are all brought here from your respective BIAs, which are, of course, as we have been talking about, somewhat arm's length at the board level, very much a volunteer-led group. And so there's lots of people who talk about declaring a conflict of interest. There is no conflict of interest unless it's pecuniary, which means you have to be declaring a very specific topic probably at your board, which would result in your business or your building resulting in more money for that or a material gain from that space. So at this level, there's very little that as executive directors you can do to direct a pecuniary interest to your space. It is good practice to declare an interest on topics that are directly related to family matters. So not so much necessary to do it as a blanket interest for every single thing that occurs should you have a spouse that's involved at the board level. We have an integrity commissioner and a process that would rule on those types of things inside City Hall. Inside City Hall, it's oftentimes very clear, at least it ought to be very clear, as to the difference between your interest and a conflict of interest. A conflict of interest occurs when you weigh in on topics where you have an interest. By declaring an interest in the beginning of the meeting or on the topic, then you remove yourself from voting and conversation on that particular issue. But it doesn't mean you remove yourself from the entire conversation of the day. So at some point along the line, it appears that Doug felt it necessary to make that declaration every single meeting. Not necessarily the case, unless as a body we're deciding on something specific that would directly benefit his wife and his family's business in that area. Does that make sense? So I just wanted to clarify that for anybody, should there be anybody who feels like there are topics that they might be directly impacted on, where they would receive money, or there might even be a perceived conflict of interest. So it's also good for the public record for you just to state where the public or other people might perceive there to be a conflict of interest. Having said all of that, again, there's very little that we'll be discussing here as a business improvement area advisory committee that would result in a pecuniary interest to individuals. Is that pretty fair to say? If you have a question on whether or not there's a topic on our agenda when it's sent out that might have an interest to you personally, then just go ahead and contact the clerks and say, hey, would this potentially present as a declared interest or potential conflict of interest? And they know the rules as good as anybody else, if not better, and should be able to direct you accordingly. Are there any questions on that? I think it's a good topic just for governance. It's also something good to understand when you go back to your boards, so that if there are issues that might arise at your particular boards that might present a conflict of interest, then you can have those conversations from a governance perspective back at your boards. But at this level, there's very little I think that we'll be covering that will result in a direct pecuniary interest to individuals related to this committee. Should it occur, we'll deal with it then.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right, did everyone have a chance to review the minutes that Lori sent out? Yes. And can I have an motion to approve the December 8th minutes? 2015. Marty and Susie. Okay, so now we have Andrea Hudson.
She just stepped out of the room. She
Oh,
was standing
okay.
at that
Oh,
corner.
that was Andrea Jenner.
That's funny.
Hi, Hi Jennifer, morning.
Good morning.
We could move on to Monica. Okay.
You're ready now?
Okay.
Lisa, if you will, I'll introduce Monica. My name is Ken Leaders. I'm the Director of Licensing and Animal Services. And one of the goals that we had to do for the next couple of years is to modernize our business licensing bylaw. The business licensing bylaw was kind of put together during amalgamation, so it took a little bit of Dundas and Ancaster and Stony Creek and put it all together into the framework that Hamilton had. And we created this bylaw that has some inconsistencies and somewhat outdated. And so as we move forward, we went to council and said, you know, we need a senior project manager that will help us shepherd us into the 21st century to make sure our business licensing is what we want. And the idea is the guiding factors that we're looking for are being very open for business, encouraging people to come to Hamilton. And so we lucked out and had the opportunity to hire Monica. She is a lawyer that she came from Windsor but has her roots in Burlington, and she's now part of our team. And over the next 2 years, Monica will be meeting with stakeholders, developing processes, looking at best practices, and will also be going across new territories that a lot of us haven't done before. And some of the interesting things is I know certainly championed by Councillor Green, the Payday Loans new bylaw, that's coming to council in February. And these are exciting times where we look at licensing as an opportunity to protect the public and also protect consumers. And so we're looking at those lenses of open for business, but also on our duty as a licensing agency to protect the community. So I'm going to ask Monica to give an overview of her project, and we'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Ken. Thank you very much for having me here this morning. As Ken mentioned, my name is Monica Suriello, and I am the Senior Project Manager in the Licensing Division. So as Ken mentioned, this rewrite will lead to a modern bylaw, and we're going to have a lens towards open for business and taking in concepts of the shared economy. So our licensing division, our licensing bylaw right now contains regulations that regulate businesses and trades within the community. It's the municipal act that provides council with the authority to pass these that they deem necessary or desirable for the public. The City of Hamilton licenses approximately 9,000 different businesses. These range anywhere from taxi cabs, hotels and motels, adult entertainment clubs, and tobacco. These spread across 85 different categories, and they are encompassed in our 29 schedules within our licensing bylaw. So the bylaw itself, as Ken had mentioned, the licensing division has identified the need to modernize our licensing bylaw. It's currently made up of a compilation of amendments over numerous years, and there are inconsistencies and some of the provisions are outdated. Modernizing our licensing bylaw will reduce the red tape for not only current businesses, but also businesses that want to enter into the community. Right now, the community is getting creative. We have a lot of businesses coming before our division with these great ideas. These are innovative business ideas that don't fit into our current model. They need to be met with a working framework and a foundation that will allow them to flourish. And the city have the ability to still protect the public and health and safety and consumer protection. So how are we going to do this? This is a 2-year undertaking with an expected completion date of October 2017. Each of the 29 different schedules will go over a review, and these reviews will occur simultaneously. So not all schedules will be moving at the same pace. Some of them will be quicker, some of them will require more consultation and more of an overhaul. Included in the review as well will be an analysis on fees to ensure that we are justifying our cost recovery approach. So a little bit of information on the 4-phase overview. Phase number 1 is team building and information gathering. So every different schedule will require a different team of internal and external members depending on what the schedule is. And at this level, we may require initial input from the community as well. Phase 2 is the draft. So our team will reconsider the municipal purposes of these schedules. Why are they currently in place? And we will examine the best practices by comparing to other municipalities. This will ensure that there is justification for our consumer protection, our health and safety, and our nuisance. In addition, the schedules will be reorganized, they will be consolidated, and duplication will be eliminated. Phase 3 is stakeholder and public consultation. Again, input may be required at Phase 1 in addition to Phase 3. And these public consultations will be held in person with community consultation sessions, and all current license holders will be mailed a copy of the draft for their review and their input. Phase 4, approximately 3 to 5 of these schedules will go before the planning committee, and they will then move to council for approval. So following the approval of the planning committee, the 3 to 5 schedules will be put before council. Once the schedules are complete and approved, the last section of licensing will be the general provisions that will go before council. General provisions include our enforcement practices, our application process, so on and so forth. And this section will constantly be developing as the schedules are reviewed, and that's why it will be coming last. So engagement. So you're probably asking yourself, well, where do I fit into this project? Well, during the rewrite, myself and my team will need your input and expertise. Now, not every schedule will require your input, so we won't be contacting you 29 different times. But for example, right now we are working on 45 different schedules, and they won't directly impact you. These are ones where we've set a benchmark, and we said, are there licenses out there that require, or are there schedules out there that have less than 15 licenses per schedule? And we set that benchmark, and we're re-examining them. We're going through what is the municipal purpose? Why are we involved in licensing this? Is there a health and safety issue? Is there a consumer protection issue? Is there a nuisance issue? If not, we should reconsider why these hurdles are in place. So those examples would be your bill distributors, your building exterior cleaners, and your mobile parks. Those are ones that we're looking at right now. In addition, we are also looking at changes in provincial legislation. So there's been changes to the tobacco legislation, and that has required us to put tobacco schedule at the top of the list to review. So these schedules may not directly impact you. So as we move forward and we pick new schedules to roll into, we will be contacting you. We'll be contacting the BIAs, we'll be contacting the Chamber of Commerce to get your input. If you inform us that this is something that you want an input on, we'll put together a meeting before the draft is even created. We'll want your input from the beginning before pen is put to paper. If there's something that you already know, if there's a schedule that already impacts you and you already know you want to have a say in it, let me know and I'll contact you directly when that schedule is going to be tabled. Excuse me. And then following the initial input collected by you, there will be a draft that's completed, the draft will be mailed out, and you're then welcome to provide input at that point as well. So as Ken had mentioned, the lens for the bylaw rewrite encompasses the notion of the Open for Business initiative. We want to ensure that there are practices and wording that are put in place as these community demands are changing, while still simultaneously ensuring that we are staying true to our municipal purpose, which again is health and safety, consumer protection, and nuisance. Recognizing that changes, such as the shared economy, are occurring in the community, this will require a close examination of each of the schedules. As of now, new types of businesses are facing hurdles to enter into the city because they don't fit into our current structure. This means that we need wording established that is broad enough to capture this new innovation while maintaining the current businesses are on an even playing field. We want to ensure that we are welcoming innovative businesses into the city and support those businesses that want to invest in Hamilton. So our objective with the bylaw is in line with Open for Business. Fewer burdens, greater growth. This project is committed to aiding in the growth of a strong and vibrant Hamilton. We want to reduce the unnecessary tape and support innovative businesses. I want to ensure that there's an open dialogue between all of us, and as your opinions and your experience will be a valuable asset to this rewrite. And I look forward to working with you in the months to come. That's all.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, so I have Councillor Green, but does anyone else have any questions? Or let's see, Rachel, okay. Councillor Green, then Rachel.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Monica. Certainly a great start. Excellent presentation. Appreciate that. I know it's not an easy file to jump into, but I'm looking forward to your work on this. My question is twofold. So the first one, I'm seeing lots of conversations around e-cigarettes, vaping. That landscape is changing through the Ministry of Health. I'm wondering if, and I'm seeing these stores proliferate everywhere, I'm wondering if that has been taken into consideration. Will there be, how far are we ahead of the curve on that? Because I see the vape shops as being a progression towards dispensaries for marijuana potentially. And I know that space is kind of a new frontier. So I'm just wondering if in your preliminary work, you've had any discussions around that.
As of right now, we've taken into account best practices across municipalities, and we've looked at what the provincial legislation has put in place. Have we directly thought of that exact idea? No, and I'm very happy that you brought it forward, and we can definitely put that lens when we're putting pen to paper for a tobacco draft.
But in relation to that, we know the legislation was just changed in January. And part of our job is we just don't license for the sake of license. We get direction from council, but we also look at what's happening in our community. And so we work very closely with all our stakeholders, public health, the fire department, the planning department, the building department. And a person doesn't receive their license until everything is correct. And so what's happened about 6 months ago, public health told us the changes are coming in legislation. And so there's a quick fix for us to change the wording of our current bylaw in relation to cigarettes to include the vape shops and all that, so we can incorporate them very quickly. But as Councillor Green says, there are other opportunities out there. There's other things that are happening. So our bylaw has to be flexible enough so that we can ensure public safety, and so we are sure that that we know the public is being protected. There is something in the works right now, and it's been working for the last year or two with public health in relation to drug paraphernalia. And that process is coming forward to council probably in the early spring. And of course, that's being driven by a councillor, but it's also being driven by public health, that we can look at that. In particular, in that situation, that dealt with closer to variety stores that hold drug paraphernalia up front near the counters, where young children can come and buy candy and they see this. And so that's what we're looking at, restrictions there. So it is a very fluid position, and as Monica has said, we're going to do a very quick fix on tobacco, so we incorporate the new law, which happened in January 1st of this year, to include vapes and vaporized apparatus in the tobacco bylaw, so we capture that, and then and move forward to make sure it's fixed.
Thank you.
Rachel?
I have kind of several parts, if that's okay, so I'll just blur on and you guys can answer if that's all right. So my understanding is that not all businesses need a license. How do you pick and choose who gets a license, who doesn't? Like I, for example, have a used bookstore that's in my BIA that's come to me kind of surprised that they don't need a license. They moved here from Toronto, and they're like, it seems crazy that not all businesses need a license. It's a great way to keep track of what's where and what's in the city and so forth, and especially for used items, like that's a great asset for the police sometimes to draw on for certain things. So one part of it is, how do you determine what needs a license and what doesn't? And what do you do with that? Like, is there a place that's listed of these are all the businesses in Hamilton under this category? Like, do you know what I mean? And then my other question or part is, are there boundaries or limitations? Like, do you set, so say for example, there's, I don't know, a vape house here. Do you then determine and say, okay, we can't have another one within this block, so I'm not going to issue a license for anyone in this boundary, but you can put one here?
So I'm going to ask you your last question first, and it's in relation to zoning and what can you restrict certain businesses from different locations. And it's certainly something we examine during payday loans. If you go downtown, every second store is a payday loan. But that regulation is restricted by the province under the Municipal Act. And so, I mean, although we know council and certainly licensing would love to have that authority to say you're only allowed so much, that is actually controlled by the Municipal Act. And I believe there's only two that actually, I think, well, maybe Marty can help. I think it's body shops and adult entertainment, like dance studios, are the only two areas that you can actually restrict in the licensing bylaw. There's other things that we can only do, like under the municipal act, we can only set fees in relation to taxi fares and tow truck driver operators. We can't set other fees that are paid to the consumers. So the municipal act restricts municipalities on what they can do, but it is a great opportunity to examine that. And we have, through a motion from the councillor here, gone to the province and asked for them to open up the municipal act to look at these situations where we would like to restrict them, specific zoning. You're right, there's only 29 schedules. We have 9,000 licenses. So traditionally what you license is something that is at risk to the community, or consumer protection, or nuisance. So we license all food shops because obviously you need public health to make sure the foods are prepared right. Anywhere that there may be bodily fluids or blood, so hair salons, and massage parlors, any kind of public health institutions, anything that is not regulated already by the province. So if it already has a provincial license, like a doctor or a dentist, then we don't license them. But if there are no restrictions under provincial law, then that's where the municipality can come in. So we don't license shoe stores and we don't license dress stores. But if we have a variety store, we had recently a pharmacy open up. So we wouldn't license a pharmacy until they start selling food products. And then when they sell food products, then in fact they would require a food shop license. Because now you're a risk to the community where are the refrigerators working correctly? Is the food being prepared properly? And so there's lots of different restrictions, but that's kind of what is decided. We also look at past practices. We license things in Hamilton that other jurisdictions don't. We license public halls, where Toronto has just recently taken off public halls. And the reason you license public halls is for public safety, to make sure the hall is safe, that if there's a dance there so people don't fall through the floor, to make sure that catering is correctly, there's hot and cold water and bathrooms, and so lots of different things. We license auctioneers where other communities don't, because probably 25 years ago we had problems with auctioneers and maybe the shadiness of what was going on, but they're much more professional now, so we're going to examine that. So those are some of the things that we do license. It's interesting you talk about lists, and just recently we have one of the things we license trades that are not provincially licensed. So plumbers we license. There's HVAC operators that look after those systems. There's about 2,500 different contractors that we actually license, and we've just recently put them on the City of Hamilton webpage. So you can actually go, if I'm going to hire a plumber, you can go to our website and say, hey, this person's licensed. And if you know they're licensed, you know they've taken the qualified test. We're not guaranteeing their work, but if in fact we have a problem with one, we can take them to tribunal and take their license away. And so that's the power of licensing. And just give you an example of that, we had an operator that was not a great operator operating a taxi cab, and was always cutting corners in relation to safety. And we had taken the person and charged them numerous times and wasn't getting the message, and the community was risk. We took that person to tribunal, and the tribunal, which is made up of council, it's a regulatory body, they actually revoked the person's license. And so we got the person out of the system so that we can ensure public safety. So that's kind of the power of licensing. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Thank you.
Susie?
I just have a quick question. So I have a marijuana dispensary that's operating in my VIA, and I have a particular problem with them being there. They operate quietly and things, but I'm curious as to how they would get a license and how they would operate.
They would be licensed by the federal government and would have nothing to do with municipal licensing. Although before they move forward, they'd have to make sure there's lots of restrictions in relation to the marijuana dispensers. They have to have a security plan. They have to have the proper security. It has to be zoned correctly. So there's lots of specific regulations, but that would be a federal regulation because it falls under the criminal code. But we haven't been part of that. We have been part of the discussions at the council level in relation to zoning and where the farms may be. but the dispensers, we don't license them at this time.
Great, thank you. Thank you. I guess I need a motion to receive the presentation. Can I have a motion? Rachel and Jennifer.
Great job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great, so we have Andrea Hudson to talk about partnership opportunities with the city.
Am I okay back here, or should I?
I think so, yeah.
I'm excited to meet everyone. There's a lot of really exciting things happening in all of your BIAs, so it's nice to be able to put faces to names. I'm Andriana Hudson. I work in corporate services here at the City of Hamilton. Our team is fairly new. Hi. I would say we're about a year and a half old. We don't have a very flowery or fancy name. The name of our team is Revenue Generation, but I can articulate a little bit about what that means. I'm really here to talk to you about how we can work with you and your BIAs, but also just to give you some basic information about what we do so that if any of your members or businesses ever have any interest that you think might be able to connect to what we do, you can have a preliminary conversation with them about that and then direct them to us. So it gives you a nice extra bag of tricks in your arsenal when it comes to being able to provide support and lend to assist with their goals. So simply put, we were created to let the city know that we as a city are open for business as it relates to partnering with the City of Hamilton to achieve the goals of private business in the community. We have a team of 4, and we are sales associates or executives, and we all look after different markets and market segments. I look after small to medium-sized local business in Hamilton. And so what that looks like is we would identify potential business that we think would be a great partner for the city, or vice versa. A lot of businesses are coming to us with particular needs. And we start with a meeting that really, we're listening. We're asking what your goals are for the next few months, for the next year, for the next 5 years. And then we'll go back and potentially create a package that strategically aligns or assists with achieving those goals. So the city has a number of assets, collateral, venues that oftentimes businesses have expressed an interest in requiring access to. So we have all of our municipal centers, we have all of our arenas, museums, libraries. Those are, farmers market. Those are structures that we have that people may have creative ideas that they'd like to tap into to have a presence there in some way, shape, or form. We also have a number of city-run events that we put on: Canada Day, Winterfest, City of Hamilton Arts Awards. Those also provide an interesting floor for people to be able to potentially come to and speak to their audience at. So we create packages that then help businesses achieve their goals. There is a cost to the packages that we create, and then that money that's brought into the city is then put back into city programs and projects and reinvested in Hamilton. So it's another way to help enhance the city community projects and programs outside of taxpayer dollars, levy and fees. So some examples of what we've done and who we've worked with. RBC has been a very great and substantial partner of ours. I'm not sure if you saw in the advertising and promotions this past year, but Canada Day was brought to you by RBC. They also created and sponsored a family aquafit program where families for free could come together to various rec centers and participate in an aquafit program that was solely sponsored by RBC. So we're leveraging, that audience that we have existing programs in rec centers, and with them work to create a new program which they then sponsored and provided, a really great program complimentary back to the community. On a smaller scale, there's a local consumer show called Craftadian. They used to be called Made by Hand, if anyone is familiar with them. They produce a show at the Hamilton Convention Center twice a year, and she identified that the Hamilton Farmers Market and its shoppers may be a very similar audience to hers, especially given geographically the location between the farmers market and the convention center, but also the types of shoppers that would attend both shows. There was a really great link. So she set up a table on the Saturday before her show at the Hamilton Farmers Market, promoting her upcoming consumer show the following weekend. That's really what we do. So we are in the business of creating strategic alliances, meaning making sure that the partner we align with is, I will say, on brand and fits the city's objectives and branding and definitely our core pillars. So we can't and don't say yes to everyone, and sometimes we'll have that initial meeting and decipher that we might not have anything that's the right fit for them, and then we'll either work to create something new, or perhaps the partnership then isn't the right fit for everyone. This is definitely not at this time getting involved in any current arrangements that any BIAs have with city organizations. So you may have already started working with some departments, or have in past years, and have agreements with regards to special pricing or concessions made, and we're not getting involved in those arrangements. These are just really creating new partnerships and packages to help you as BIAs achieve your goal, as well as the businesses that fall within them, and the rest of Hamilton as well. Does anyone have any questions? Is that clear-ish?
So in your work in prospecting out the BIAs,
Yes.
were there any conversations around existing opportunities relevant to each BIA that you might be able to, in weeks to come, send out to the BIAs to say, okay, in Ancaster, here are the amenities around your BIA that might be of value to your market, downtown International Village, Ottawa Street. Has there been that kind of asset map happen yet in terms of opportunities?
So do you mean collateral within each BIA that we would then potentially sell, or what we can do with the BIAs to help you and create a package?
In that market, acknowledging that most BIA, the vast majority of BIAs are fairly local to, a 5 or 10 kilometer radius for the most part. There are some destination places, but still, has there been like a good look at where it might make sense for certain districts?
Well, I mean, we only really affect or work with something within a BIA that is city-owned or run, whether that be an actual building, facility, or structure, or a particular event. So we haven't specifically looked at each BIA to see what assets are within that, because as of right now, we're operating on a one-off basis where we're working with each particular partner. But for example, and tell me if I'm not answering your question properly.
Well, I was thinking like along the lines of, let's say, and I don't know the geography, but let's say in Dundas, there's an arena that has a digital sign, or there's stuff inside. Like, are those the types of assets that you're looking at?
So it's everything. It's the tangible and something that isn't. So for example, I have a current client that I'm working with who has identified some key geographical areas in Hamilton. And they would be James Street North, Locke Street, Concession was one of them, and he asked me, within those areas, what does the city of Hamilton own as a starting point?
Right.
We think our audience is there, and then what can you do? And then if I don't already know, then I'll go to the required department and find out what assets we have within that area. I'm here mostly as a way to potentially be able to assist with, I know it's, many BIAs have events that they put on. You have, certainly the bazaar that goes on. You've got the Oktoberfest, I believe you're still doing. So a lot of times BIAs in areas are looking for ways to spread that message outside of their already existing shopper base and area, and going out into the community and bringing people in from different parts of Greater Hamilton to those events, to those areas. So as a way of us to be able to assist you with those goals, I was thinking that would be That would be a way to start. But I mean, we look every day at our assets across the city, just depending on each client and what they request. Someone is specifically interested in all of our municipal centers. So then we pull information on where those are all located, the foot traffic that goes through, what each municipal center provides as a service, who's coming through. And so in that way, then we would then touch on different areas. BIAs.
Thank you.
Marty and then myself.
I'm still struggling with trying to figure out how useful this can be at a localized level.
Sure.
The message I hear from you is the fact that you're looking at public assets. So it would be parks.
And yes, anything that is owned, operated, or managed by the city of Hamilton.
Okay, so if we look at that and we look at it in concession street context, and it is publicly owned, then it's a matter of the client that you described generating a new idea that we come to you to say, I want parks to transform into X, Y, or Z, and you would be a facilitator? Is that a fair way of asking? I'm trying to understand your service delivery.
More often than that, it would be us having an initial meeting with a client and them saying, you know, for example, we're working with someone who deals with RESPs, and they said, you know, we've identified families, either you know, someone is about to have a child or they've got children under 5. That is a target audience for us. How can you help us get in front of them? So then I would kind of come back and look across the entire city at all of our assets and build a package for them that would help them attract that audience, which may mean going to local libraries that have reading programs for children under 5, and maybe they set up face painting or an activation there, and then while the parents are waiting for the child to have their face painted, they have an opportunity to perhaps speak to the parents and say, would you be interested in learning more about our programs, that sort of thing. So it's really specialized right now with regards to each client. What we would love to do and what I would love to do for small to medium-sized business is really create templates which are almost like menu items, so that they can come to us and we can, you know, really be able to offer things across the board. But each package is created individually.
Thank you.
Okay, so my question is, actually I think I have 2 questions.
Sure.
I often get inquiries about renting or how to rent a car at the Municipal Service Center in Dundas. I normally refer these people to facilities. Would you be a better reference?
No,
Or-
that process stays the same.
Okay.
So we're really a new way of doing things for local municipal government. This is a new idea. I think some other cities do this across the country, but not many. So we're not looking to take over existing formats like that or existing reference points. These are,
Okay, so
Yeah.
would it be fair to describe you almost as like a partnership facilitator where, for example, well, I'll take it back to me for the example. If someone wants to partner with me for an event in Dundas, then I come up with a package of how they can activate and promote themselves within Dundas. Would you be the same for the
we
city
would be
of
that for the city.
Sick. All right,
Yeah.
that is new. All
Yes.
right.
So again, it's new. It's something that wasn't done in the past. So not to override or not to take over any existing departments and how they service. So park rentals, arena rentals, seat program, that all stays as
Right.
is.
And is there a fee, or is the package you're putting together have like a value?
Correct. There's a cost associated with the package that we put
Okay.
together.
All
And
right,
part
so
of
it all depends on your package and the partnership you want to form.
Yes, because it's also uniquely created for each partner. So part of the initial conversation, there would be a discussion around budget. So we're going back and building something that meets the needs and their particular budget, and something that's not outside of their scope.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
One thing I'd recommend, Adriana, is that maybe you set up meetings with all of us individually.
Okay.
Just because we run so differently from each other, and I know, for instance, our events are run differently as well. So for my bazaar event, you know, I don't necessarily want someone corporate coming in to form a partnership, or You know, so just to pinpoint it,
Right.
not necessarily corporate, but, you know, someone from the outside
Right.
coming in. So that
So-
way we could sit down and meet with you and sort of go over what the focus of our events and what the spaces that we use through the city.
Sure.
Right? So,
So that's actually not what I mean. So that's the opposite of what I mean. So we're not looking to leverage your events. We're not looking to come into things that you own or that you manage or that you operate and include those in our partnerships. I'm here to tell you about the services that we provide so that you can use them in the same way those partners would. So if you want to promote Oktoberfest in Dundas, in Ancaster, in Stony Creek, we can help you reach a new audience through city assets and collateral. So we're not looking to come in and attach any sort of corporate partner to anything that you own or do.
I don't know if I speak for all, I think we're just having a hard time pinpointing what the program actually is. I know I am, just, I
Right.
get it to a certain degree, but I don't know.
Think of us as a way to provide advertising or marketing. I mean, a billboard company, if you wanted to put up a billboard, you would go to the company that owns that particular billboard. We're just the company that owns a number of different assets, and because we're the city, those assets come in so many different shapes and sizes. Sometimes they're a physical structure that you could advertise on or set up an activation in, and sometimes they're non-tangible things like programs that we can create together, like RBC did with the Aquafit program, and that we can co-promote.
Okay.
So this is this is about us being able to assist you promote your programming and businesses, and I'll be setting up meetings with specific businesses. You don't need to go out and do that on our behalf, but then you can at least speak to that if anyone asks the questions. Yeah, sorry, is that a little bit more? Yeah, okay. And I can send something out too. I had brought something which please do forgive me, my graphic design skills did not lend well to the printed form. So I'm going to send you something to distribute. I did bring my card so everyone has access to my contact information.
I have one more question.
Of course.
Sure.
Yeah, I went back and forth like 6 times saying, I want to be good. But let's just call it what it is. It's revenue generation.
Well, that's what our team is called again, right? So that we are looking for other sources of revenue for the city.
And so are we in a space now where services, things the city typically offers will be branded much like we would name a facility or those type? Is that the type of program that we're in now? So we brought up parks, for instance, Kiwanis Park in Ottawa Street BIA is a public asset. I think it's a good example. If a textile company came in or somebody came in and said, I want to now name this, Matthew Green Textiles at East Kiwanis Park and advertise that for a year, would that be a possibility?
It would be on the table for discussion. That would definitely be something that my colleague Brian would look after on a larger scale with a larger corporation. Probably wouldn't fall into small to medium-sized business offerings that I've been working with. But again, this is not about just going out and finding money wherever it is and taking it. We've had to say no to a lot of people, and we've had to say, I'm sorry, but we don't have something that can help you. The city has a very respected brand that needs to be protected, and we are only able to enter into partnerships with brands that align well with us strategically as well. So yes, we are tasked and approved by council to generate other sources of revenue for the city, but we are very meticulous about who and how we go about doing that.
Are you saying that Matthew Green Textiles is not a brand you want to do business with?
I-
Just kidding. So
But you know
back
what I mean, this isn't just, at all costs. This is
Adrian, just I think
thoughtful.
back to the original question that I first asked, maybe
Yeah.
once you get further down this program,
Yes.
could you send us an asset list of things that are already at play? And then that'll give our businesses probably a better opportunity to see what type of packages we're looking for.
A list of existing programs and partnerships, or a list of all the City of Hamilton assets?
Assets are probably better, or opportunities, however you want to list them. Because I think the challenge is, in anything, when you're selling a product, you don't know what the product is, it's new, right? Like I know when I'm getting an ad in the spec, or CH,
Yeah.
or the billboard, I can see that. But I think the challenge we're having right now is nobody's seeing the billboards. Nobody's seeing.
Yeah, no, fair enough, and I guess the challenge is I don't have an asset list because it's created each time we enter into a new partnership. So what I will do is send an example of things that we have done already, which will help kind of lay it out for you. So, you know, that example of Craftadian when it comes to events, setting up a table at the market, that would be something on a smaller scale of what that looks like. That wasn't something that existed before, that wasn't something that was done before, that was something that out of a need that they had. And again, you know, with relation to the RBC program, something more tangible would be, again, I'll bring up an example of the farmers market because they've been really innovative at the ground level of starting to partner. The farmers market now has screens throughout it, and that's something that was new and done as part of this program. Part of the content on those screens are city programs and advertising for city projects and programs, and part of that is advertisers now have a space within those walls and that audience. But when I send something revised, I will be sure to send examples of what we've done. And
Thank you.
thank you.
If that's everything,
Yes.
then I guess I just need a motion to accept Andrea's presentation. Jennifer, and let's do Marty. 'Cause Jennifer and Andrea.
I'm going to leave my business cards at the back so that you
Great,
can take
thank
one
you.
on the way up.
Yeah.
Okay? Thank you.
I think she saw your name over here.
I did it. Oh, were you just trying to slap Marty?
There's a policy for that.
Yeah,
Put it on
no
down.
violence.
Fanning.
Nice.
Great. Amanda, is Amanda ready? Amanda, you are presenting, respecting the 20,000 homes point in time count.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda DeFalco, and I'm the Manager of Homelessness Policy and Programs with the City of Hamilton. I have a presentation, so I'll put that to show you. Thank you. So I'm here to talk to you today about a citywide initiative called the Point in Time Count. Before I go into what the Point in Time Count is, I wanted to spend just a couple of minutes talking to you about why Hamilton is doing a point in time count and how it is mutually beneficial for both public sector, individuals experiencing homelessness, but also the private sector as well. So when we talk about homelessness, we're talking about, just so we're all on the same page, homelessness is an extreme form of poverty and social exclusion. So anywhere where people are living in conditions that are not fit for human habitation. So that could be on the street, it could be in shelter, it could be staying on a couch with a family member or friend temporarily, so it's people without a permanent home. Issues relating to homelessness are, there's many different layers to homelessness. So there's individual issues like people might have mental health issues or addictions that contribute to their homelessness. There's system level issues, so the way that we locally, provincially, and federally set up our systems to help people who are experiencing homelessness. And then there are also structural issues like our social policies around affordable housing, minimum wage, social assistance. All those things compound the issue of homelessness. So there's many different layers to it. Despite the complexities within homelessness, it is a solvable problem, and I think that that's something that oftentimes we don't talk about because it's so complicated, but in fact, when you start breaking down the pieces, there are things that we can do to effectively end homelessness, not only in Canada, but also right here in Hamilton. So homelessness really stemmed from the recession in the 80s. That's when it became really prevalent in communities. It became visible, people sleeping rough outside of storefronts, in parks, things like that. And really the response was at a charitable level. So very grassroots organizations started helping the homeless, as we say, where they started offering mats in church basements, meal programs, those sorts of things, as a temporary solution. But what we quickly realized is that homelessness wasn't going away anytime soon, and it was because it wasn't just about the individual issues. There were also several systemic issues that were happening with respect to social policy reform at a federal level. So for example, the federal government stopped investing in affordable housing. So all of those things compounded the complexity of homelessness, but we kept responding to it as an individual issue. And so we set up systems as a result to respond to homelessness, and thereby we developed what we call the poverty industry. So now we have social structures, formalized programs. We're investing not in volunteers anymore, but in staff. We have overhead. Organizations themselves have developed their own infrastructure to deal with and address the issue. What we now know is that that was just managing the problem, because again, when you continue to focus at an individual level, you're not really getting at the source of the issue. And so researchers and governments and policymakers started asking ourselves, despite all of this effort that we're putting into this, why isn't anything changing? What we found was that currently Canada invests $7 billion a year in homelessness. So it's not a lack of intention and it's not a lack of resources. So what we did is we started investigating what's actually going to solve the problem at a systems level, at a structural level, and at an individual level. And we started pulling back those layers. And now we know, we have a good sense of what it is that we need to do to actually end homelessness rather than just continuing to manage it. That includes affordable housing, and it includes matching people with the right types of services and supports that will actually end their homelessness experience. So Canada actually invested in the largest research project on homelessness in the world, and that was called the At Home Chez Soi project. And what they did was that they took two groups of people who were experiencing the most chronic forms of homelessness. So those are the people that we oftentimes think of when we think of homelessness, the people that are sleeping rough, that have probably been homeless for 15 or 20 plus years, that are just stuck in the system, and it seems like they're sort of like the hopeless cases, for lack of a better word. So they took two groups of those individuals. One is that they continue to provide service as usual, so the traditional forms of service. The other group, they decided to implement what's called Housing First. So Housing First is a direct intervention that helps get people housed first and then wraps services and supports around them specific to their needs. So for example, if that person has severe mental health issues, they get them housed and then they provide them with really intensive mental health supports. What they found after 2 years was that the people who they provided the Housing First to were successfully housed at an 81% retention rate. So 81% of those individuals remained housed after 2 years of receiving that type of intervention. Can anyone guess how many people were successfully housed after 2 years with the non-Housing First intervention? Wild guess? Throw it out there.
0.
Higher than 0.
10%.
30%. So 30%. So we now have evidence to show that Housing First for people who are chronically homeless is an effective intervention based on sound evidence and research. But that takes time. We can't just destabilize that $7 billion system that's set up, but we can do things to move towards changing that so that we can start reinvesting those dollars into the things that actually work. What we find is that for every $10 that we invest in the effective interventions, we receive a $20 return on that investment. So that's locally in our community, it's provincially through the healthcare system and corrections, and it's also at a federal level as well in terms of the return on that investment. So in order to start moving in that direction from not managing homelessness anymore, but towards ending homelessness in our community, there are things that we need to do, and that's essentially we need to devise a plan. So how do we go about doing that? We need to think about it from a business approach rather than from a charitable model. So what are the targets? What are our goals? And how do we effectively move in that direction? And so one of the first points to start that plan is by doing what's called a point-in-time count. And a point-in-time count is important because it significantly increases our ability to take action towards ending homelessness so that we don't keep talking about it as this unsolvable, hopeless problem that's just going to exist in our community forever. And it helps us to build evidence around how we make decisions and then effectively measure our progress in ending homelessness moving forward. So point-in-time count is essentially, in the simplest of terms, counting people experiencing homelessness in your community. More than that, we're also doing a survey with people to help better understand their housing and healthcare needs so that we know what investments we should be making that will effectively address those needs. So for example, if we find that there's a high prevalence of people experiencing homelessness that are youth in our community, we will know the approximately how many youth, and we will know what their needs are so that then we can start investing in those services and supports in addition to affordable housing to help ensure that they are not homeless for long periods of time in our community. So we will be conducting our first citywide point-in-time count. We did do a smaller scale point-in-time count focused on the business, the downtown core, in April of 2015. And we identified 109 people who were chronically homeless. That means homeless for long periods of time with a lot of issues that probably typical interventions won't be effective for those individuals. And what we did is that we reinvested our services to Housing First. And as of November 30th, out of the 109 that we identified, we've housed 101 of them. So we know that, and it's proven to be effective. One person had to be rehoused a second time, but everybody else has maintained their housing. So we need to go back out and do this at a citywide scale to develop a baseline essentially and to better understand what services and supports we should be investing in to help end people's homelessness experience. So the surveys themselves will be conducted on the streets, so there will be people, teams of people going out on the streets and surveying individuals, also in the shelters, in community agencies that serve people experiencing homelessness, and in hospitals as well. So how we will be doing that is that we'll primarily be using volunteers to help conduct the surveys. Those volunteers will be led by trained professionals in our industry. So there'll be social service workers or healthcare professionals that will lead those teams of people, and everyone will receive training around how to engage with people experiencing homelessness and how to conduct that survey. We are seeking also private partnerships as well. So for example, we're currently working with Arsenal Middle right now, who will be potentially having they have an orange team, they call them, who are a group of individuals who have an interest in volunteering in our community. And it's a large group, and so we're coordinating them coming out. First Ontario Credit Union has Blue Wave volunteers, a large volunteer base that we're working with them on having them come out as well. We're also looking at this as an opportunity to provide individuals who will be sleeping rough in the cold in our community with some items as well, so socks, hats, mitts, things like that, and so we're working with private sponsors for that as well. So that's happening all on February 21st and 22nd, and then we're going to be sharing the results of what we learned through that survey on March the 4th in council chambers, and that is a public meeting. So does anyone have any questions?
Marty and then Rachel?
I was wondering if you could help me define the aspect of homelessness. I obviously recognize people who don't have homes. Would you define people who live in legally conforming lodging houses as being housed?
In the most technical of terms, we would define people as long as those conditions are habitable and they have some form of rights and responsibilities. So, for example, a tenancy agreement or that they have rights to be in that environment.
Thank you.
Rachel?
I have a couple again, if that's okay. So I guess my first question is, what about those who aren't really connected? Because I find there's a lot that kind of slip under the radar. So how do you reach those, or do you have a percentage that you're going to mark it up by to kind of equate for those that aren't reached? And how do you, like, I know a lot of homeless unfortunately have mental health issues as well. So I'm assuming the volunteers will have some training in order to help, you know, kind of pick through the responses or so forth. And also, where do you find the houses to house them? Because don't we have a huge lack of affordable housing? So do you have enough houses, or is that an issue?
So the three questions that I heard was, how do you reach out to people who are not as connected to the formalized supports?
how do you address people who may be experiencing mental health issues when you want to complete a survey with them, and do we have enough affordable housing? So I'll answer those questions in that order. Thank you. No problem. And so how do we reach out to people who are less connected to the formalized supports? There are various different ways that we can do that, but we do recognize that people who are hidden homeless, so those not connected to the formalized services, are the hardest to reach out to, and that we just acknowledge that in our survey results, is that usually our number will always be an underrepresentation because it is a point in time, and we can't, we're not going to get everyone. But some of the strategies that we do use to try to mitigate that is that we open up community hubs or neutral locations. So for example, we'll be surveying in a community space at West 5th. We'll be surveying at a recreation center. We'll open up a space for people who might not want to go to the Good Shepherd or the Salvation Army, for example, because it makes them feel like they're losing their dignity by doing that, because they're staying with family and friends instead. So we set up these neutral sites and locations, and then we advertise very publicly. So in libraries, recreation centers, in the newspaper, about if you don't have a permanent place to live and want to come and talk about that experience with us to help us better inform the way that we respond, then please come out and do a survey. So that right now is our strategy for that. In terms of how do you engage with people experiencing mental health, it will be the trained professionals, and that's why we have professionals attached to every team, so that volunteers who might not have any experience working with people experiencing homelessness, it gives them a different level of comfort, both the volunteers and the people experiencing homelessness as well. So they'll be highly trained and skilled in being able to manage those types of situations because they work with those individuals each and every day. And lastly, do we have enough affordable housing? The answer is a big no. We do not have enough affordable housing, but this helps us to identify what we need in our community in order to effectively end people's homelessness experience. And affordable housing isn't only for people experiencing homelessness, but it is always for people experiencing homelessness, because the first step to ending homelessness is always going to be housing. It's not only about housing, so there's addictions, mental health, but it is always about housing, because that's why somebody's called homeless. So we're very intentional about that. Right now, some of the things that we're doing is leveraging off of some funding that we get through the federal government for housing subsidies, for example, to help reduce people's rents and things like that. But absolutely, affordable housing is the primary investment that we need to be making in this community to help move us towards ending homelessness.
And I have Kathy.
Did I hear you say that you are going to be doing the surveys in certain advertised locations, or are you going out on the street?
Both.
Okay.
So we'll be conducting surveys on the street encompassing the full geographical scope of Hamilton. So obviously we'll have a higher concentration of people in the downtown core, because that's usually where people are sleeping rough. But there are also people in encampments by the railway tracks, for example. There's people, you might see some panhandlers now on the mountain, the southern part of the mountain, so we'll be going up there. We'll be going out into Glanbrook and Flamborough and Winona, but likely not the same intensity of people that will be surveying the streets. So we can do extrapolation exercises in the more rural areas, but we'll probably have 1 or 2 teams that will be going out just to make sure that our assumptions are correct and validated.
Okay, so then you will be on these 2 dates, you'll be in downtown Hamilton doing surveys in and around the streets. Why don't you go out to the service agencies that are housing them overnight?
We do that as well.
Okay.
Yeah, so we'll be going out on the streets, we'll be going into all the shelters,
Okay.
and we'll be going, during the day, we'll be going to all the community agencies that deliver services to people experiencing homelessness. We'll be going into the hospitals as well.
Thank you.
Sorry, just one quick question.
Sure, go ahead, then I have Councillor Green.
Just in regards to what we utilize in churches as well as a foundation, just because I know on the mountain how active our church participation is in regards to homelessness and providing those services on a daily basis.
We've reached out to several religious organizations to ask for their support and endorsement. We have received a few responses back so far, and we're happy to go out as reach out as far and as much as we need, as long as we have the volunteer base and the capacity to do that. But absolutely, thank you for that. That's a good point.
So I think this program is absolutely fantastic. I know not too long ago in the city, they were almost afraid to say the word poverty. I think we've even had a past mayor who refused to say the word, and now we're having the conversation and we're seeing where we can humanize the issue and really connect resources to some of these challenges that I think the biggest challenge we're facing as a country in terms of homelessness. The fact that we have so much and yet there's people who have nothing at all. So I'm really grateful that you're bringing this project forward, because it'll allow us to give statistics and names and faces and begin that conversation around affordable housing, social housing, and all the other things. But what I think is most important out of today's meeting is that each BIA is in of itself a community hub. You have resources in your community that you know about that the city doesn't. There are people, churches, organizations in your community that we don't know about. This is going to take a large team of people canvassing the city, intentionally looking to engage this conversation. So I know one of the most interesting conversations that I've had or heard, particularly around Syrian refugees, is what about Ours First? Here's an opportunity for all those good folks that are out there who want to support Canadians that are down their luck to come on out and volunteer. So I'll make the ask right now on behalf of not just the work that Amanda's doing, but across the city, that if you have businesses, volunteers, people who are interested in this issue, here's a chance over 2 days to go out and volunteer. I'll be signing up and I'll be volunteering, and I'll be also trying to raise a small army of people through my connections and networks to come out and humanize this issue and start to have like a really open and honest conversation about homelessness in our city around affordable housing. Because you're right, Rachel, the continuum goes from mortgage payment to missed mortgage payment to eviction notice to where am I going to go next? And I deal with those conversations in my office all the time, and it's unsettling, but it is the reality of what we're faced with in Hamilton. So I'll personally ask all of you guys to go and ask your boards and your communities to do some soul searching on this one. Here's a great chance for us as Canadians to get together and support people, and I'd love to see this be a pilot project probably for a national conversation on a national housing strategy led from and supported by Hamilton. So I think this is a huge opportunity for business to show their social responsibility, and I'm making a personal ask right now for this project.
Can I ask a question, Councillor? In the policies related to new developments that are housing related, is the council looking to qualify those as part of over the long term, having some mixed use subsidized housing in those new developments? Are they looking to incorporate some of that into the ask as part of the development industry? Great question. You'll be happy to know that when I held my nose on the Tivoli project, sometime way back when, 22 stories, there's a process called Section 37, which allows the city to use, for the public good, fees that would be attached to bonus density projects. At that time back in, I don't know if it was May or June or whatever it was, I put a motion forward for what's called inclusionary zoning, which would be a clause that would say, when you want to go beyond the official plan in your density, Dundas is a good example where they just went up, that we could use Section 37 to leverage that extra density and that development charge to either have them put inclusionary zoning or affordable units in their building, or go cash and loot a Hamilton housing. Right now, the municipalities have scarcely limited resources when it comes to new building for affordable housing. So there will have to be a shared responsibility, I believe, fundamentally, with development in this red-hot real estate market to leverage that to make sure that Hamiltonians aren't displaced for some class of nouveau riche that come in from outside of the city to take advantage of all the great things that are happening there. So I think there could be development, it could be responsible, but I agree that that there needs to be shared responsibility. And that motion was supposed to come back in September, and they kicked it down the line until this year. So it will come back. We will ask for it.
when you see it in the paper, the developer's gonna come back and say, we're not ready yet, the market's not primed yet, it's not enough profit yet, and I call them on all of that stuff, so that will be one piece of the puzzle.
Rachel, do you still have a question?
Yeah, it was just more of an ask. So with regards to Get Volunteers, would you have anything you could send us that we can forward by email out that includes that ask and who to contact and what it's for, kind of thing?
Absolutely, yeah, I can definitely send that if the chair is amenable to that.
Anything on social media that will start ramping up on it?
Yes, yeah.
I started tweeting.
Awesome. Yes, yeah, we have our communication staff that are supporting us on this, so we were just starting the launch now. We didn't want to go too early into it because we want people to generate that momentum and keep it going until the actual count itself. So within the next week, you'll start seeing things on Twitter, you'll start, the volunteer recruitment campaign is being launched this week, so as soon as that's launched, I can definitely forward that on. So it's going to
Sure, if you could send that to our good friend Lori here, she has the ability to send it to all of us. Thank you. I have a question. What is the next step after the surveys?
So the next step after this, once we have that target number, so we're going to be heavily focusing on those individuals that are the least likely to become housed without intensive support. So those are probably the most complex cases, people who've been homeless for a very long time in our community. We have a committee that we've struck that are primed and ready to coordinate with us on reaching back out to those individuals and getting them connected to Housing First supports. We have subsidies available for them to get them into housing while we're waiting for more affordable housing to become available. Our rental vacancy rates have right now sustained at a healthier rate than what they were back in the summer. So we have housing options. We also have landlord engagement strategies. So we have people who are engaging with our landlords about the initiative that have signed up to allocate units through subsidies for people in this program as well. So we're working on getting our community coordinated and primed. What I'll say is that that's sort of what's happening on the ground, but we want to use this information as a way to inform what we invest in moving forward as well. So we will have a better understanding of where our targeted investments need to go in terms of homelessness programs and services. And this is connected to a federal initiative. So the federal government is strongly encouraging communities to participate. We're one of 30 across Canada that will be participating in this. And it will be used to inform federal policy as well.
Oh, Kathy?
I just wondered if there's a deadline for signing up as a volunteer, because you're going to have to get them trained. So what kind of timing are you looking at?
Yeah, so we're hoping to get that out this week, and then we'll probably, I don't have the exact date because we just had a meeting about it yesterday, but unfortunately I was at a different meeting, so I can get back to you on that. But there will be probably about a 3 to 4 week timeline a 2 to 3 week timeline on getting people registered and signed up. We did do a similar process through the 20,000 Homes campaign last year, and we found that 2 weeks is probably a little short, 3 weeks is probably a little better. So
You might tap into the volunteer base that was developed through Pan Am. There's an incredible core of volunteers through them.
great suggestion, thank you.
Great, well, thank you. That was very informative. Can I have a motion to accept the presentation from Barb and Kathy? Everyone had their hand up, it's like it was time to go. Alright. Oh, is it conference call time?
Yes, so
Okay.
I just need a couple minutes
All
to
right.
set up. So